He handed me the letter across the kitchen counter like it was nothing. A folded piece of paper, with my name printed in neat, impersonal font. He did not look up when he spoke. "You'll have to find somewhere else to live, Mom. Madison and I need the space now." I stood there in the home I built, surrounded by the walls I designed, the beams I signed with my own initials before the plaster covered them. This wasn't just a house. It was the first thing I touched after my husband died. The only place I ever felt whole again. But to him, it was a bargaining chip. A convenience. A future he thought he deserved more than I did. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply nodded. He mistook that silence for surrender. He didn't know I was already planning how to take it all back. And this time I would not leave quietly. If you've ever poured your heart into something only to watch someone else claim it like it was theirs all along, you know the kind of silence that settles in your chest. Not grief. Not fear. Just the slow turning of resolve. Hit that like button if you've ever been pushed to the edge by someone who mistook your kindness for weakness. Subscribe for more stories where quiet revenge is crafted with care and carried out with precision. My name is Karen Dawson. I'm 63 years old, and for most of my life, I kept my head down and built things. I was an architect for nearly 4 decades. The kind who measured twice and spoke once. After my husband passed from a stroke 9 years ago, I didn't fall apart. I picked up a pencil, sketched a plan, and began again. The house I designed wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. It sat on 4 acres of quiet land, a bit removed from town, surrounded by trees and wind. I chose every tile, every faucet, every ridge in the beams that lined the ceiling. My husband would have loved it. I think that's why I made it real. My son Tyler used to call it my monk mansion. Said it looked like something out of a design magazine for people who didn't like people. I laughed when he said that. He always had a way of making jabs sound like jokes. Tyler is 30 now. He works in tech and changes jobs like he changes passwords. He was always bright but impatient. Charming, yes, but entitled. He was 12 when his father died, and I suppose I made the mistake of filling every empty space with work. I missed a lot of his growing up. We got along better when we weren't under the same roof. He visited now and then, usually for holidays or when he needed a breather from city life. But then came Madison. She was all curves and confidence, a social media personality with a voice like honey and a gaze that never quite looked you in the eye. Tyler brought her up one weekend and introduced her like she was already family. She complimented the house with a flat smile and called it quaint. I made roast chicken that night. She posted it with the caption, "Homestyle aesthetic," tagging a brand of luxury tableware I didn't even own. 2 weeks later, Tyler asked if they could stay a while. Their lease had ended, and they were looking to save money before finding something bigger. I said yes. Of course I did. He was my son. It started small. Madison rearranged the living room. She said it had weird energy. Then a new sofa appeared. Mine, a hand-stitched piece I'd saved 6 months for, vanished. My grandmother's vase was nowhere to be found. I asked once. Madison blinked and said, "Oh, that chip thing? It broke. Sorry." Tyler changed too. He stopped asking before using the guest car. He began referring to my house as our place. During a brunch, he joked about turning the garden into a home gym. I laughed along, but something inside me tightened. One morning I came down to find the walls repainted. A soft gray instead of the warm cream I had lived with for years. Madison said it felt more modern. She hadn't even asked. Later that evening, I heard them whispering in the den. I wasn't supposed to be home. I'd cut my errand short. Through the thin door, I heard the words, "She'll give it up if we push a little." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling I had once measured for light angles, wondering how long they had been planning to nudge me out. Then came the talk. Tyler sat me down like I was the tenant, not the owner. He had papers. He mentioned equity. Said the house was an asset, and we needed to be realistic. I asked him one question. How long have I been a guest in my own life? He didn't answer. But Madison smiled as if she already knew. After that conversation, nothing returned to normal. Tyler acted like the decision had already been made, as if my presence was something to be managed. He began introducing the home differently on calls with his friends. He would walk Madison through the kitchen, narrating future renovations with an easy confidence, saying things like, "Once Mom finds a new place, we can knock out this wall." I stayed quiet. Not because I agreed, but because I needed to understand the shape of their plan. Madison stopped pretending to be polite. She started moving her things into the master bedroom, one item at a time. First it was a pair of shoes beside the closet. Then her skincare took over the bathroom shelf. I found my own robe shoved in a laundry basket. She claimed it was a mix-up. Tyler's tone became managerial. He started printing out apartment listings for me. Left them by the coffee maker. Circling them in pen. Most were for senior communities I had no interest in. One even came with meal service. When I didn't respond, he moved to guilt. Said I was making things difficult, that I wasn't being supportive of their future. I reminded him the house wasn't his. He reminded me I had signed a small portion of it into joint ownership years ago. Back then, it was a tax decision. I had no idea it would one day be used against me. One afternoon, I came home to find the garden gone. All the herbs and lilies I'd planted by hand, replaced with gravel and the frame of a pre-ordered hot tub. No one asked. No one warned me. When I confronted Madison, she laughed and said, "Oh please, it was just a bunch of overgrown weeds." That night I cried for the first time in years. Not from sadness. From something colder. The realization that I had raised someone who saw me not as a person, but as an obstacle. A few days later, I received the letter. It came folded in a white envelope. Typed. No greeting. No apology. Just a statement, "You have 30 days to vacate the premises." Signed by Tyler Dawson. Beneath it was legal language drawn from his 10% ownership. A clause misused, but not illegal. I stared at that letter for a long time. The last time I had received something so cold was the coroner's report after my husband died. I didn't say a word to Tyler. I didn't even look at him when he passed me in the hall. I went to the study, the one room they hadn't touched yet. My husband's old desk was still there. His books. The sketches we once drew together. I lit a small lamp and sat on the floor, my back against the bookshelf. For hours, I said nothing. I listened to the hum of the house. I watched shadows move across the grain of the wood we chose together. Somewhere in the stillness, it came to me. Not a scream. Not a tantrum. Just a quiet realization. They had mistaken my silence for weakness. My age for helplessness. My restraint for surrender. What they didn't understand was that I built this place. Not just the walls, but the rights to the land beneath it. I knew every permit, every document, every legal detail buried in county records. They wanted to remove me. But I wasn't going anywhere. Not until I pulled every last nail of this plan from the foundation up. And when it was over, I would not shout. I would not argue. I would simply walk through the front door and lock it behind me. I began the next morning the same way I used to begin projects, alone, focused, deliberate. I made coffee, tied my hair back, and pulled the house file from my bedroom closet. It was heavier than I remembered. Inside were copies of land surveys, title deeds, contractor receipts, and one critical piece of paper most people overlook during construction: the split title agreement. During the build, the structure had been processed separately from the land due to a permitting delay. That delay meant the house and the land were initially filed under two different documents. Eventually, everything was brought under one umbrella, mine. Except for the 10% stake I had signed over to Tyler years ago, which applied only to the dwelling itself, not the soil beneath it. It was a technicality. But technicalities build cases. I made 3 copies and stored them in different locations. Then I called someone I hadn't spoken to in a decade, Michael Ward, a retired judge who had once mentored my husband in law school. He met me for lunch 2 days later, took one look at the documentation, and said, "If you're ready to fight, you'll win." That night I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. I started tracking Madison's social media posts. Every sponsored product, every tagged location, every video filmed inside my home. I noticed she had registered her brand as a business, Madison Lives Company, with the house address listed as her headquarters. I knew what that meant. Zoning violations, tax gray areas, permit issues. Next, I reached out to an attorney specializing in real estate litigation. I gave her everything: files, dates, maps, photographs, Madison's live streams. She was younger than I expected, sharp, and unflinching. "You've got leverage," she said. "You just need to use it right." In the meantime, I remained quiet at home. I ate dinner at the same time every night. I kept the kitchen clean. I didn't respond to snide comments or unsolicited suggestions. I watched. Listened. Waited. One afternoon, I visited the county records office. Tyler and Madison were trying to update the deed behind my back. The clerk informed me that an inquiry had been made, but without my signature, nothing could proceed. I smiled. Then I filed a hold request to freeze any structural ownership transfers until a legal review could be completed. My restraint was no longer silence. It was strategy. The first domino fell quietly. I submitted a zoning complaint under an alias through the county's online portal. Within a week, a code enforcement officer knocked on our door. Madison answered in her robe, holding a smoothie. He asked to inspect the property based on flagged commercial use at a residential address. She looked confused, then irritated. I stood behind her and said nothing. 2 days later, a citation arrived. Unauthorized business activity. The fine was steep. Madison paced the living room with her phone pressed to her ear, yelling at someone on her team. Tyler sat silently, scrolling through county ordinances, trying to make sense of the violation. The second blow came in a padded envelope. A formal cease and desist letter drafted by my attorney, addressed to Madison's LLC. It stated clearly that her company had been operating without the consent of the legal landowner and that all content produced on the property was subject to challenge. She laughed when she opened it. Then she reread it. Her face changed. That same week, I filed an injunction. A court order freezing all changes to the property until ownership could be reviewed in full. My lawyer submitted the split title documents, the financial trail, and evidence of manipulation by Tyler. We also attached testimony from Madison's former assistant, who was eager to share screenshots of messages discussing how to pressure me into leaving. In one message, Madison wrote, "We just need her out. It's not like she can fight us." The judge reviewed the material and issued a temporary restraining order. Tyler and Madison were no longer allowed to make any legal or financial decisions regarding the house. Not until the matter was resolved. That night at dinner, Tyler said nothing. Madison barely touched her food. I sat calmly, cutting my chicken, the sound of the knife against the plate echoing in the silence. The final move came when I offered Tyler a deal. Quiet, private, final. Sign over his 10% and walk away. I would drop the civil claims. I would not pursue damages. He refused. Said I was bluffing. So we went to court. He wore a gray suit. I wore the navy blue dress I wore when I graduated from architecture school. His hand shook while he gave his statement. Mine stayed still in my lap. When my lawyer spoke, the room went still. I watched my son for signs of recognition. Of regret. But there was nothing. Only disbelief that I had not only fought back, but fought smarter. By the end of that week, the house was no longer a battlefield. It was mine again. The judgment came on a Wednesday morning. I sat alone in the courtroom as the judge read his final decision. Tyler and Madison were ordered to vacate the premises within 15 days. His 10% stake was dissolved by court order due to proven coercion and bad faith. I was granted sole ownership of both the structure and the land. When we stepped outside, Madison stormed ahead of him, her phone already recording. She spoke into the camera with forced calm, pretending nothing had happened. But her voice trembled. A week later, one of her brand sponsors dropped her. Then another. A video clip circulated of her mocking senior homeowners during a live Q&A. The comments turned brutal. Her accounts went silent. Tyler didn't say goodbye. He packed in silence, barely able to meet my eyes. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded their things into the car. The silence that followed was the kind that carries weight. When the last box was gone, I walked through the house alone. The walls no longer echoed with tension. I ran my fingers along the banister. Opened the curtains wide. Sunlight filled the room. I brought back the old sofa from storage. Replanted the herbs in the garden. Hung up the painting Madison had taken down because it was too dark. For the first time in months, I cooked a meal for myself and ate it without hurry. The silence wasn't empty. It was peace. I had not raised my voice. I had not begged. I had simply remembered who I was. A woman who had built things her whole life. A woman who still could. Justice didn't come loudly. It came in the form of a front door closing behind them. And the soft sound of wind moving through trees they never learned to respect. I used to think love meant giving everything without question. That being a mother required sacrifice without limit. But I've learned that love without boundaries invites erosion. Of self, of dignity, of trust. What I lost in that house for a time wasn't just space. It was the belief that I mattered. That my history, my effort, my grief had weight. But I found it again, in silence, in structure, in stillness. My son walked away from something he never truly understood. And that's not something I can fix. Nor will I try. Some lessons are not ours to teach. This home stands not just on soil, but on survival. Mine. And when I walk barefoot through the garden in the early morning light, I don't think of what I gave up. I think of what I reclaimed. This was never about revenge. It was about remembering my own worth, and refusing to let it be written over. Have you ever been treated like a placeholder in your own life? Like your story ended the moment someone else stepped in? Share your experience in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if this story reminded you that quiet strength is still strength, hit that like button. Subscribe for more true stories where justice doesn't shout, but it echoes. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't destruction. It's restoration. And sometimes, the last laugh is not loud.